Hello folks, welcome to the channel. As you can see, I have dug myself out of the man cave to review today's movie from this beach. Normally, I pride myself on the 3D surroundings I create. Locations I choose to film my reviews from. But this fake-ass looking beach represents all the work I am willing to do for today's review because screw you, Shammers, you get what you give. I consider today's movie to be an insult to the intelligence of people like you and me. As a result, for a bit of a change, I'm gonna go full critical drinker today. If you're not familiar with critical drinker, don't worry about it, you'll figure it out by the end of the review. And if you are familiar with them, don't worry either, this isn't gonna turn into a regular occurrence. Unless, of course, it makes you laugh. I'm gonna take you through the plot summary as quickly as I can. And also, don't forget,
Old is a frustrating disappointment from 2021 directed by M. Night Shyamalan. It's based on a brilliant French graphic novel called Sandcastles. Apparently, the moment Shammers read it, he said he was changed, which is weird given he did the exact same thing to this movie that he does with all his other movies. Just like the novel Cabin at the End of the World that served as source material for his recent Knock at the Cabin movie, Sandcastles is a psychological supernatural horror and it revolves around a group of people aging quickly at a beach. The novel's enticingly vague, just like the Cabin at the End of the World was. Old stars 71% of Hollywood's current actors. There's Thomasin McKenzie, Abby Lee, Alex Wolff, Gael Garcia Bernal, Lexa Swinton, Rufus Sewell, Aaron Pierre, Biggie Cripes, Eliza Scanlon, Francesca Eastwood, Ken Leung, Beth Davids, Nikki Amuka Bird, Eamon Elliott, Gustav Hammerstein, Nolan River, Kaylin Jude, and of course, M. Night Shammers himself.
I know folks, this isn't even all of them and the cast's already bloated and ridiculous. But rest assured, we don't get to know any of them, and I won't be bothering with the majority of the characters' names so you won't get bogged down with extraneous details. I've got your back.
Before the movie starts, the opening credits show the edges of the title fonts growing and shifting, implying aging, which is the first of 76 ways M. Night Shyamalan convinces himself he's still creative and original in this movie. And then the actual movie starts with the Kappa family in a bus on their way to their holiday resort. The daughter, Maddox, is singing away much louder than the actual music itself, but as soon as her mother, Priska, compliments her singing, Maddox stops singing because now she's embarrassed. Then their 6-year-old son, who's named Trent, probably, defends his sister by saying,
"Spontaneity has been stripped from her."
Which is exactly how all 6-year-olds speak in Shammers movies. After they've done his mandatory book reading, that is. Then Priska apologizes to the children and says,
"You have such a beautiful voice. I can't wait to hear it when you're older."
Which is the most unnatural dialogue in the movie so far. That is, till she takes another breath and speaks again. When Trent asks if the bus ride's gonna take much longer, Mommy advises him to stop wishing away the moment. And she's saying that because this movie's about a beach that makes you grow old quickly. And for the record, my friends, I am already frustrated and we're only 1 minute and 52 seconds into this piece of shit. And that's including the opening titles. A moment later, they pull into the hotel and it has all the warmth and charm of being shuttled into a psychiatric facility against your will. Everyone's lined up and smiling, but their arms are crossed in that way that says they're fully prepared to tase you and carry you to your room hogtied and crying. Immediately inside the door, they're presented with custom-made drinks, and the kids are whisked away to their own drinks fountain by total strangers in a foreign place. Once they're gone, Priska asks her husband Guy if he can believe she found a place like this online, and he doesn't answer, probably because he's used to her asking stupid questions. But if I was him, I'd have pointed out that's how everybody's found literally everything for the last 20 years. Over at the kids' drink fountain, Trent and Maddox meet Idlib, who's the nephew of the fella that greeted them on their arrival, and that kicks off one of Shammers' famous children's conversations. Idlib tells them his uncle manages the resort, so Trent says,
"I can do a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, which is a considerable thing to do."
Once they get back to the room, the children get all excited. So Guy, who's an insurance adjuster, reminds the little rascals about injury statistics. And he does that because M. Night Shyamalan's characters are always exactly as deep and interesting as their job descriptions. Gael Garcia Bernal is one of my favorite Mexican actors. I've been a fan of his since he Tu Mama Tambien in 2001, and one of the scariest elements of today's movie for me personally is watching M. Night Shyamalan's directing choking the life out of him right in front of us in full HD. And as Shammers finds it challenging with the basics of show don't tell when it comes to character, he writes Trent as a kid that goes to all the other characters to ask them their names and occupations. And seeing as we never learn anything more from M. Night's characters than what they do for a living, he saved himself a shitload of writing work doing it this way. Basically, he's cutting corners on the corners he's already cut. And in the next scene, Shammers bastardizes the beautiful, innocent, memory-forming, natural act of acquiring childhood friends when he writes this out for Trent to say.
Then we can be friends. You can come over to my house and make up stories. Then we can go to the same college together and become neighbors with mortgages.
And in the next scene, Guy and Priska discuss the fact they're on holiday to give their children one last vacation before they separate. This is a beautiful, thoughtful, selfless sentiment that goes a long way towards painting a picture of their parenting skills. And then they start full-on screaming at each other with the children on the other side of a paper-thin wall. So that's that sentiment ruined. Next, we cut to a very short scene with a rapper named Mid-Sized Sedan on a beach with a blonde girl who's just stripped off and gone into the ocean. There's no way his name's gonna stick with me, so kindly forgive me ahead of time. Back at the resort, we meet another family ordering breakfast. Crystal, who's your average dime-a-dozen modern narcissist, berates the waiter about a drink on the menu that's supposedly fortified with calcium. She advises him she's calcium deficient, and as such, really needs to know if the drink description is accurate. And if you were thinking the drink's ingredients should have nothing to do with her condition because she should rely on prescribed medications for something like that instead of random ingredients in sugary hotel drinks, you wouldn't be wrong. Back with the Kappa family, the resort manager suggests they go check out a private beach on the other side of the island, reserved for special people only. They say yes, because otherwise the movie would just kind of stop. And then we're introduced to another couple, Patricia and Jaron. This particular scene is so rigid and free of emotion that it sincerely makes me question if Shammers might have developed some sort of prescription medication problem himself.
I'm a doctor. My wife has epilepsy. I'm a nurse. My name is Jared.
The gang shuttled off to the private island and Shammers is driving. A lot of people complain about him inserting himself into 11 of the 13 movies he's directed. I've always thought he was a decent actor. He seems to be able to deliver his lines without coming off self-aware. I just think perhaps it might be better if he acted in somebody else's movies for once. Because every time I see him, it takes me out of the story. And of course it does. But that doesn't mean he's ever going to stop doing it. All 538 of the cast members make their way down to the beach without a single issue. Then we're shown vultures up in a dead tree, which isn't bad foreshadowing. So I'm guessing somebody suggested it to M. Night. Young Maddox sees Minivan the rapper and recognizes him immediately from 100 yards away, meaning obviously he hasn't aged at all. Then they grab some chairs and despite speaking in the vernacular of late 18th century 45-year-old dandies up until this point, the kids reenact a fight between their parents with dolls, just in case we didn't understand what all the screaming was about 4 minutes ago. And while Trent's off somewhere in an alcove that makes less physical sense than the impossible window in The Shining, the body of the blonde girl from earlier floats up behind him. So they pull her from the water and Hatchback the rapper comes over and says,
"Oh, damn."
with the same emotion and humanity the previous epilepsy scene had. And Patricia and Jaron show up, and the doctor implies Station Wagon the rapper's responsible for the dead girl. He suggests his nose is bleeding because she tried fighting him off. But before things escalate, the doctor's called off to his mother. Jaron, which is Darren with a J, by the way, because M. Night Shyamalan, tries going back to get a cell signal, but he's not able to because the rocks put a pressure on his head that makes him pass out. The very same rocks they all just walked in through a few minutes ago. While the doctor's speaking to his mother, Priska comes over and asks if he'll look at her son. When he says he doesn't have the time to, she tells him she works in a museum. Kindly refer back to my comments about Shammers' characters being nothing more than their occupations. Then the doctor's mother's heart stops, and the doctor blames Station Wagon the rapper. Does he do that in service of the story? No! He does it because it's insinuated one of the characters in the graphic novel is racist. And if that feels disconnected and weird and cheap and lazy, it's because it is. Then Trent saves Shammers more writing work by asking Patricia and Jaron their names and occupations. And then Jaron guesses Trent's 11 years old, and when he says he's 6, his sister Maddox backs him up without acknowledging he suddenly looks looks 11, even though they're standing right beside each other. So the folks start making the faces you'd expect them to make, while the siblings have no reaction at all to the impossible physical changes in each other. The whole thing overwhelms Luxury Rental the rapper, so he beelines it for the resort. So the dutiful doctor goes after him, but again, they're both stopped by the invisible one-way barrier that prevented none of them from coming in. They all agree to branch out in pairs to find a way off of the beach, but they wake up starfish next to each other just a few seconds later. So Guy and his wife sneak off to discuss what's happening in private, and Guy points out the statistical unlikelihood of the events transpiring before them, like a real-life warm and fuzzy father. And thanks to Shammers' dialogue, Mom's no better, and she tells us they're on a remote, undeveloped island, just in case all of us in the audience are fucking houseplants. And then the doc slashes executive rental car the rapper's cheek with a knife, even though the actor's hand doesn't get within a foot of his face, and the wound heals within seconds, which throws the math way off in terms of what this island's doing to them. And then the dog dies. Then the mentally 6-year-old Maddox takes a walk on the beach with dual overhead Cam the rapper, who somehow still hasn't aged since he's been there, and he tells us he has a rare blood condition. So Maddox, the mentally 6-year-old, tells him her thoughts have more colors in them now compared to yesterday, and that they're quieter. Understandably, he doesn't reply, because what she said makes absolutely no fucking sense. Then Patricia gets everybody together by demonstrating her fluid Shyamalanglish.
Everyone, gather!
Who the fuck says gather? Everyone would have assumed you wanted them to come to you if you shouted everyone by itself, because it applies to everyone. M. Night Shammers, have you ever been in the company of an actual normal human being? Like, not actors who are constantly kissing your ass to try to get parts in your movies? Like, anybody who would call you out on your ridiculous speech patterns? I don't know why I keep doing this to myself. Well, at least everybody's clicking the like button, so YouTube knows how hard I'm working on my videos. At least there's that.
And then they all stand around in a circle, and Shammers does that thing he does where he spins the camera around to distract us in the audience from noticing the story is fucking stupid. Then Mom reveals she has a tumor before falling down. And fortunately, the doc specializes in this exact region of the body, and what were the odds of that? So they slice her open, but the wound closes too quickly. Then the doctor's focus starts slipping as he's developing schizophrenia, which is a very common side effect of growing older. But in another fortunate bit of writing, Jaren's a nurse, so he suggests they all stuff their grubby, sand-covered, greasy holiday hands inside the woman. Instead of laughing the idea right off the beach, the highly experienced specialist doctor agrees. And what do you know? It works! And they slide the melon-sized, perfectly round, blood-free tumor out of her abdomen like they're swiping a piece of fruit out of the fridge. And she fully recovers. Then 1994 Ford Civic, the rapper, decides to take a peek at his girlfriend's dead body for some reason, but instead of being delicate and respectful of the remains, he does this.
Personally, I wouldn't have done it at all. I mean, anytime any of my ex-girlfriends have passed away, I've just left them alone. But if you really couldn't help yourself, maybe you should just peel back a tiny corner of the blanket, you know, slowly, like inch by inch, so you don't end up shocking yourself. This mid-sized sedan name is starting to make sense.
When everyone rushes over to see what he's freaking out about, all that's left is a skeleton. And remember when Mom told the doc she worked in a museum? Maddox assures everybody that her mom knows about these sorts of things.
So then Mom says, I am not a forensic pathologist, but through our excavations in the museum, I know it varies based on soil and temperature. And my best guess, with an exposed body, the flesh will be gone in approximately 7 years, which is exactly what a forensic pathologist would have said. I think he's doing all of this on purpose. Specifically to me, he has to be.
It's the 45-minute mark in the movie, and all the children are 6 feet tall and stubbly, but it's this skeleton that helps them collectively determine something's happening with time. Then the 2 youngest kids, who would still be 6 years old mentally, regardless of outward appearances, go hang out together, alone in a tent, on an undeveloped island, without anybody supervising them during the most precarious and unpredictable events of their entire lives. When the mentally 6-year-old Kara says she's scared, the mentally 6-year-old Trent says,
It's best to focus on specifics in the present. in unsettling situations.
And if that wasn't absurd enough on its own, the adults sit around in a circle explaining what's going on for so long, the 6-year-old Trent gets his new 6-year-old girlfriend Kara pregnant. Then she delivers the baby and it dies immediately. When Crystal, who is somehow the doctor's wife, realizes her face is starting to wrinkle, she breaks down and tells Maddox about a boy she used to date. And of course, she speaks Shammers English too.
He wasn't very handsome and I left him. We looked silly together, he and I.
When was the last time you or anybody you've ever respected talked like that? Shammers and I had a falling out at the soiree and we were at each other's throats, he and I.
Then the good doctor stabs government-issued transport vehicle the rapper, and his wounds don't heal quickly this time, even though the cut on his face did, and he dies. So Jaren decides to have a go at swimming around at the resort. Then Maddox confronts her mother about cheating on her dad, and Mom's excuse was the tumor. That confuses me and Maddox so much she goes for a swim, and while she's out there, Jaren defies nature. The waves clearly coming directly towards us, the undertows going in the exact opposite direction because that's how that works, and his body comes into the frame perpendicular. And given the forces involved, that's like one of the kids suddenly falling all the way up the cliffs. And Patricia's clearly devastated, probably because she can't believe her husband went and defied the laws of physics right in front of everyone. Then the 6-year-old Kara laments about all the things she's never got to do in life before she climbs up the cliff in hopes of escaping. But she doesn't, and I am glad. That's right, Alex Wolff. Cry like you did in Hereditary. That's literally why Shammers hired you. Then Patricia has 11 seizures and dies while everyone watches. Then Guy's vision goes fuzzy in an instant, not gradually, because age-related macular degeneration is based on people's birthdays, apparently. And then Crystal emerges from an alcove somewhere, and she's looking like Tammy Faye Baker's stunt double on meth. Then Mom loses her hearing, and her husband tells her he knows she was messing around on him, and she shouts an apology. And then they become closer than they have ever been, because that's exactly what happens when you find out your life partner's been unzipping somebody else's trousers. And then the kidults find an amazing journal sitting in the sand that explains in great detail what's happening. And if this development feels totally random, it's because it's based on a scientist character from the novel who doesn't appear in the movie. Then the doctor appears from the darkness and starts stabbing Guy, who can't see where the knife's coming from anymore, and somehow the doctor looks the same as he did when they arrived. So Mom sprints off up the beach to find a knife, and she tells the kidults to go hide somewhere, so they do, even though they'd technically be the strongest and fastest people on the island now. And they find Crystal hiding in a cave, and she tries throwing rocks at them, but her calcium deficiency causes all her bones to break, and it's hilarious, even though I'm pretty sure it wasn't meant to be. Mom returns with a rusty knife, and while she's stabbing the doctor, she explains the rust is going to act like a poison in his blood, and thank God she said that out loud. Otherwise, I may have determined something all by myself in this movie. A few seconds later, the doctor's dead, even though Mom's still alive and kicking after half the island were up to their elbows in her 5 hours ago. And the folks finally pass away, leaving the kidults behind by themselves. The following morning, when the sun comes up, they both look 50 years old, but they aren't. They were 6 and 11 24 hours ago. So they build a sandcastle, and this is where the graphic novel leaves things. But M. Night Shammers doesn't know how to leave things, so he has them decode a secret message the manager's nephew left for them the day before. After reading it, the 50-year-old 6-year-old Trent explains exactly what the kid was thinking and feeling when he wrote the message. Then they swim out to some coral, thinking it'll shield them from the effects of the beach. And they both spend a remarkable amount of time underwater without drowning. In fact, they stay under the water the whole time Shammers is packing up his stuff and calling back to the resort. And the big twist ending we've all been waiting for that doesn't actually happen in the novel is that Bruce Willis was dead the whole time. Sorry, I meant Big Pharma is using the beach to do long-term effects testing on sick individuals. The drinks they gave them at the start of the movie contained experimental medicines for everyone, so thank God they were all thirsty and nobody shared. And to wrap it up, 6-year-old, 50-year-old Trent tells a cop he met the day before what's happening. The cop, who's on holiday far from home on an undeveloped island, gets everyone arrested by making a phone call well outside of his jurisdiction. And that is the end of Old.
If you're still here, I would like to thank all of you for sticking this one out. I'd also like to thank Ruth Parks for reminding me of this movie and guilting me publicly into watching it a second time. But in the end, it turns out it was fine and it didn't bother me at all. If you excuse me for a moment, I have something I have to go and take care of now. Until next time, folks. It's me, Johnny, from that video you just loved, and I know you loved it because you're still here, and seeing as you are still here, you should probably go down there and smash me in the face to subscribe, and seeing as you just smashed me in the face, you should probably do something nice to make up for it, like maybe watching this next video. Do it!